Paul Marshall. Welcome to Marshall Amplification here in England. The company's history goes back to 1962 when Mr. Marshall, my father, had a music shop in London. He used to play with Pete Townshend's father of The Who. So Pete Townshend used to go into the shop and have his guitars repaired after he'd broken them, buy his musical instruments from there. And when he was in there, he obviously asked about the amplifiers. He wasn't happy with the amplifier he was using. And so Mr. Marshall built an amplifier for Pete Townshend with Dudley Craven and Ken Brann at the back of the shop. Now we have that amplifier, the prototype they set it on, up in the museum above me. The company went from strength to strength in the early days. In 1964 we had a unit in Middlesex, in Hayes in Middlesex, which was making 20 units a week. The company moved to this industrial estate in 1966, and at that time the distribution was being done by a chap called John Jones in Birmingham, and Mr. Marshall used to drive up and down the A5, which ran right in front of the building here, sort of on a regular basis. So brought a unit on this industrial estate. The company was still expanding very rapidly, and by the early 80s it moved a couple of times to factories on the same industrial estate. But in the early 80s moved to a unit on this side of the building. This used to be two industrial buildings. This unit here on the left we moved into first, and this where we're standing right now was a service road servicing both the factories. Then in the early 90s Mr. Marshall brought over the second factory and built into the reception that we have now, which is quite a good reception. It's nice. We've got some of the older amplifiers up above us in a little bit of a museum up there. And as you can see around the reception, there are a lot of awards in here, and have them refurbished, serviced and revalved. Bands touring in the UK are welcome to make appointments, drop in, drop their amps off. We'll service for them in the middle of that tour. They can wait, have a cup of coffee while it's done, then off they go and carry on with the tour. And that offer is also open to any user of Marshall amplifiers. Now we've got quite a small service department, which we're quite proud of, because we give a 3-year warranty in the UK with all Marshall products, and all the products in the UK are looked after by the 6 guys in there for the 3 years. So we have a very small number of warranty issues, percentage-wise, that come back and need servicing. Now on the wall here we've got the pictures of various bands that have come in. Often it's the guitar techs that come in more than the bands. We have a roll of mild steel, Zintek coated mild steel. It comes in a roll. It's the exact width we need. As it passes through the machine, you'll see that the holes are all punched out by the machine. It cuts out all the slots. It will do the threading if we wanted to do the threading, and there's very minimal waste. Obviously one of the concerns for a manufacturing company is the waste that you create. So here we keep waste down to the minimum. It's the exact width we want. We then cut the board to the exact length we require for the chassis. Okay, the chassis is then going to be cut and comes off. That is your complete chassis, it's a flat pack. It's then passed over to the yellow arms. And the beauty of this machine is it builds the whole chassis in one go, in so much as it will cut it, it will cut the holes out of it, and it will also bend it up. So it passes it from one arm to another. So the first arm, one side is bent up, it's then passed across to the other arm, where the other side is bent up. And then the end result is your complete chassis. And that's ready for the pegs to go in for the circuit boards, and then the circuit boards to go in. But this isn't for all our amplifiers. This is just for the sort of AVT range, really, the mid-range amplifiers, the bass range amplifiers. The valve amplifiers have a slightly thinner mild steel and have ends on. Because of the thickness of this mild steel, we don't have to weld ends onto these chassis. And that is a complete chassis for the AVT that was made on this machine. As you can see, it's quite a thick mild steel. There's no end caps on it. And it's all put together in one roll of the machine. Okay, this is the Viper's press. We do most of the valve amplifier chassis on here. As you can see, it's a flat bed. So you've got a flat bit of steel, mild steel goes in there. Slightly thinner than the mild steel used on the earlier Dimmico machine. This has got 28 different heads in it. It will punch all the holes you want, it will thread the holes you want, do anything you want as long as it's flat. This machine though is much more versatile, so it can be used by R&D if they want to play around with the design of a certain type. They can plan it in the computer, and this machine will punch out whatever they want, whatever they draw, basically. You do get more waste. As you can see, it leaves a skeleton afterwards when the chassis have come out. It takes a bit longer than the other machine to punch out all the holes. And all that waste has to be recycled. When the chassis are punched out, they get brought over to this machine here, where they get bent up. So they're bent up into a box section prior to welding. So this is the chassis that's been made on the Viper machine that you just saw. This chassis was made as a flat, it was bent up afterwards. See, the welding has been done on the corners, and it's now got this gold effect because it's been anodised, which will stop it from rusting. The chassis you saw made on the other machine, which are behind me here, they, as you can see, are not gold because they're Zintek coated. They don't need anodising. The chassis then all congregate here and wait to go through to electronics, where the circuit boards are put in, and they get ready to go through to the amplifier, final stage. At this stage, when the chassis are ready for electronics, the fronts and backs are put on the valve amplifier chassis. As you can see here, this one here would be for a triple super lead TSL 100 head. Stuck on the front of the chassis, all the markings on there ready. The only other thing that has to be done after that is the serial numbers are put on when the back end is put on the chassis. Okay, this is our hand-wired section. In this section here, we do all the hand-wired amplifiers. As you can see, it's point-to-point wiring. It's very neat, very expertly done. This particular amplifier I'm holding here is quite special because this is the 40th anniversary of the 100 watt, which, as you can see, as original, is made with a dual output stage, dual output transformers. It's got the large KT66 valves in it, and it's all made by hand, as it would have been done, obviously, in 65 when they were originally made. The reason why they used two 50-watt output transformers is because in 1965 they didn't believe you could run a 100-watt output transformer. So they put the two 50 watts together because, again, it was Pete Townsend of The who was, in those early days, bands were playing larger and larger venues, but you didn't have the PA systems that you now have. So they had to create their own sound and send that sound across the vast audiences. So they wanted bigger amplifiers, larger speaker cabinets, and many more of them. And so in 1965 we built the 100-watt amplifier with initially an 8x12 stack, which Pete Townsend thought would be a good idea. But his roadies obviously didn't like casting that around and soon complained. So he brought it back, and that is when the first stack was born. And Mr. Marshall cut that in half, put two cabinets and fixed them together. Hence the 100-watt stack was born in those days. So this is where the hand-wired amplifiers are built. As you see there, the engineer is putting all the bits together. He will soon put the boards in and do the point-to-point wiring as well inside it. He's putting that bit there together for the valves at the moment. This is an area that we've recently expanded because the demand for amplifiers as they used to be made, so to speak, is more and more. For amplifiers, for example, the 1974X that we now make, I think it was back orders of about a 3-month wait for the amplifier in the UK. In this section here, the AVT chassis, which you saw being made on the Dimico press, all come together with the electronics. The circuit boards are brought up to this point. The fronts and backs are put on the chassis here. The circuit boards are put in on the bench. All the controls are put onto the chassis. And then the chassis is tested at the end of the line on the computer, which puts a guitar signal through the chassis, making sure everything's working as it should be. Now we test all our amplifiers 4 times before they leave the building.